The first thing I saw when I pulled into my driveway that afternoon was a pile of broken red brick sticking out of the asphalt like somebody had dumped a demolished chimney in front of my house and rolled a steamroller over it. I just sat there with both hands on the steering wheel, engine still running, staring at it like my brain needed another second to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. Then my phone rang. It was the contractor asking when I planned on sending the final payment. That was the exact moment I realized this wasn't some sloppy construction job or a misunderstanding or one of those, "Hey, we can fix that tomorrow" kind of situations. No, somebody had just paved my driveway with what looked like recycled garbage and expected me to thank them for it. I live outside a little town called Millbrook, Pennsylvania, in a place where everybody notices if a truck you don't recognize turns down your road. My house sits back from the street behind maple trees and a gravel shoulder, and for years the driveway had been hanging on by pure stubbornness. Winters up there are brutal. Freeze, thaw, freeze again year after year. By the time last October rolled around, the cracks were deep enough to swallow rainwater and potholes had started collecting leaves. Every time I backed out in the morning, my coffee splashed onto the console. My neighbor across the road, Nancy, had been joking for months. "Eli," she'd yell while walking her dog, "one more winter and that driveway's gonna qualify as public hiking trail." She wasn't wrong. So I finally decided to repave it before snow hit. I called around, got estimates. Everybody landed around the same ballpark, between $7,500 and $9,200 depending on material and warranty. Then a guy named Derek Kane from Keystone Premier Surfacing showed up. Derek had that polished contractor confidence. Clean boots, somehow dark pickup truck with spotless lettering on the side, clipboard tucked under one arm. Mid-40s maybe. Good handshake, looked you right in the eye. The kind of guy who made you feel like he'd already solved your problem before you even finished explaining it. He walked the driveway, nodded a few times, then looked over at me and said, "Honestly, I'm trying to build more business in this county. If you're okay with me using your project as a showcase, I'll do premium hot mix asphalt for $6,000. I remember actually laughing. "Why cheaper than everybody else?" He smiled. "Because once folks around here see it, they'll call me, I'll make it back." Fair enough. He had insurance, paperwork, state contractor license, a website with reviews, even dropped a couple addresses nearby where he'd done work. I drove by one of them myself, looked good, so yeah, I signed. Wednesday morning, his crew rolled in around 7, 3 dump trucks, skid steer, asphalt roller, it looked legit. They tore out the old driveway fast, faster than I expected, honestly, and hauled everything away. At first, I was impressed. Then around noon, I stepped outside with coffee and saw what they were unloading. It wasn't black. It wasn't even close. It looked gray, rough, chunky, like gravel mixed with powdered concrete and brick dust. I walked toward one of the workers and said, "Hey man, what exactly is that?" The foreman didn't even pause. "Reclaimed blend," I stared. "Reclaimed what?" "Eco-material, same performance." That answer felt slippery. I called Derek immediately. He picked up cheerful as ever. "Hey Eli, what are you putting on my driveway?" He laughed like I'd asked if rain was wet. "Recycled asphalt composite, totally normal, green product, compacts beautifully. It looks like crushed demolition debris. It'll look better once rolled, trust me." And maybe that was the part I hate admitting. I wanted to trust him because my old driveway was gone. Half the new surface was already down. What exactly was I supposed to do at that point? Stop a paving crew mid-job? By late afternoon they were finished, and it looked terrible, flat technically, but ugly as sin, chunks visible everywhere, red brick fragments, white concrete specks. The texture felt uneven under my shoes. Nancy wandered over from across the road and literally stopped halfway. "Oh my God!" Not exactly what you want to hear. I crouched down and grabbed a loose chunk with my fingers. It crumbled, actually crumbled. Derek showed up maybe 20 minutes later to collect payment. Same smile, same clipboard. He handed me the invoice, $10,000. I looked at him and said, "You quoted 6. He tapped a line item. "Material adjustments, base reinforcement." I laughed because I honestly thought he was joking. Then I saw he was. "Derek, I'm not paying 10 grand for this." His whole face changed, like somebody shut a door behind his eyes. He folded the clipboard slowly and said, "Then I'll file a lien." I shrugged. "For what? Dumping rubble on my property?" He stepped closer. "For labor and materials, and trust me, you'll lose." Then he turned around, climbed into his truck, and drove off like he'd already won. 2 days later, certified mail hit my mailbox. Construction lien notice. Claim amount, $10,000. I remember standing in my kitchen reading it while my coffee went cold. There's a weird kind of anger where your body gets very still, like everything inside you stops moving because if it doesn't, you might break something. That was me. I called a construction attorney named Clea Bennett in Harrisburg. Best decision I made the entire year. Clea listened quietly while I explained everything. Didn't interrupt once. Then she said, take photos of every inch, and Eli, don't pay him a dime. By Friday morning, she had an independent paving inspector scheduled. His name was Ron Mercer, former highway engineer, 70 years old, sharp as a razor, permanently looked like he was disappointed in the world. He bent down, chipped off a sample with a metal scraper, sniffed it, then looked at me. This isn't hot mix. No, he shook his head. Not even close. He rubbed debris between his fingers. Cold patch aggregate, cheap recycled filler, barely enough binder to hold together. I looked back at the driveway. So I'm not crazy. Ron gave a dry little laugh. Nope, you paid for steak and somebody dumped road kill on your plate. And right there, standing in cold October wind with broken chunks of fake asphalt in Ron's hand, I realized this thing was way bigger than one bad contractor. Because Derek Kane didn't sound worried when he threatened me. He sounded practiced, like he'd done this before. And I had a feeling if I started pulling on that thread, the whole thing was about to come apart. And I had a feeling if I started pulling on that thread, the whole thing was about to come apart. Turns out I was right. Clea filed paperwork to challenge the lien that same afternoon, and while she handled the legal side, I started digging. At first, it was basic stuff. State business records, review sites, old addresses. The kind of late-night searching you do sitting at your kitchen table with reheated leftovers and way too much coffee. And Derek Kane started getting interesting real fast. Keystone Premier Surfacing had only existed for 11 months. Before that, another LLC, Northridge Asphalt Group. Before that, Liberty County Paving. And before that, this one almost made me laugh because it was so shameless, American Premier Driveways. Different names, same guy, same mailing address. Same rotating phone numbers. And the reviews, once you got past the fresh, polished five-star ones, were brutal. One woman in York County said her driveway cracked within 3 weeks. A retired couple outside Carlisle claimed he threatened them with attorneys after they questioned the invoice. Another review mentioned construction debris mixed into surface material. That one made me stop, because now it wasn't coincidence. Clea called me around 6. You're not gonna believe this, she said. Try me. He's had multiple complaints filed before, never enough evidence to stick. So he just keeps rebranding. Exactly. I leaned back in my chair and looked out toward the driveway under the porch light, gray, ugly, chunks catching shadows, like evidence sitting in plain sight. The next morning, Ron came back with lab submission paperwork. We're sending samples out. For what? Everything. I raised an eyebrow. He looked serious. When material looks wrong, sometimes it's just cheap. Sometimes it's worse. That answer stayed with me. While we waited, Clea sent Derek a formal demand letter. Either remove the lien and repave properly or prepare for fraud litigation. He responded through email that same night. 3 lines. Your driveway meets industry standards. Balance remains due. Future contact through counsel. No apology, no concern, nothing, just arrogance. That kind of confidence usually means one of 2 things. Either someone knows they're innocent, or they've been getting away with something for a very long time. A few days later, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. A guy named Frank Dawson said he found my name through public lien records. Did Derek Kane pave your place too? Yeah. Long pause, then he laughed without humor. Thought so. Frank lived 40 minutes away. Same exact story, low quote, fast crew, garbage material, then surprise invoice and lien threat. By that evening, Frank introduced me to another homeowner. Then another, then another. Within a week, there were 12 of us on a group call, different towns, different driveways, same script every single time. One woman named Melissa had tears in her voice talking about how she'd paid in full because Derek threatened foreclosure. A veteran named Curtis had already spent thousands tearing his surface out after chunks started washing downhill into his garage. Every person sounded angry, but underneath the anger was embarrassment. That awful feeling like you should have seen it coming. And Derek had counted on that, counted on people staying quiet. Clea didn't waste time. She helped organize everything: contracts, invoices, photos, emails, inspection notes. We built a timeline. It became obvious fast. Derek would open a company, undercut competitors, move fast, use junk material, threaten liens, collect what he could, then dissolve and start over. Simple, dirty, profitable. By the following Tuesday, we filed complaints with the Pennsylvania Contractor Licensing Board and Attorney General's office. And then the lab report came back. Ron called, didn't say hello, just said, "Eli, you need to sit down." My stomach dropped. What? The samples contain asbestos. I actually thought I heard him wrong. What? Asbestos fragments, multiple samples. For a second, everything went quiet. My kitchen, the clock, the refrigerator humming, nothing. Then I looked through the window at my driveway. And suddenly all I could think was I had been walking on that thing, tracking dust into the house. My niece had been over the weekend before. My sister's dog had run across it. I felt sick. Ron explained it slowly. Older demolition materials, roofing compounds, siding fragments, industrial debris sometimes carried asbestos. Strict disposal laws existed for a reason. Nobody was supposed to repurpose it. Ever. Clea escalated immediately. Attorney General, environmental enforcement, county health, everything. And once environmental investigators got involved, things moved fast, very fast. An EPA contractor arrived 2 mornings later in full protective gear, which, let me tell you, is not something you ever want to see standing in your driveway before breakfast. Nancy walked across the street holding coffee and froze. Why is there a man dressed like a space astronaut in front of your garage? I said. Long story. She stared. Bad. Pretty bad. They sealed samples, ran field analysis, took photographs. Then one investigator, a woman named Denise, asked if I had Derek's invoice and contract. I handed them over. She read quietly, then looked at me. "Do you know where he sourced this?" "No, we're going to find out." And they did. Turns out Derek had been buying demolition aggregate from a scrapyard operation outside Lancaster under a shell agreement. Material flagged for disposal. Cheap because nobody wanted it. He was getting it for next to nothing, then blending it and reselling it as premium paving product, illegal on every level. Environmental, licensing, fraud, public safety. And the part that really made my blood boil, investigators recovered emails, one chain between Derek and the supplier. The supplier warned him one batch tested questionable. Derek's response? Run it through and compact it. Nobody's checking driveways. I read that sentence 3 separate times. Then once more, because I couldn't believe somebody could actually write something that reckless, and hit send. Clea looked at me over the paperwork and said quietly, "That email just changed everything." And she was right, because this wasn't a contracted dispute anymore. This was intentional. The licensing board suspended Keystone Premier, surfacing immediately pending investigation. Then the supplier got raided. Then local news picked up the story. And suddenly Derek Kane, Mr. Clean truck and perfect handshake, was on television with reporters outside county offices asking questions he clearly didn't want to answer. He tried the whole routine. Misunderstanding, vendor error, unintentional contamination. Then Denise and EPA investigators released the documents. The email chain, purchase records, delivery logs, it all lined up. He knew every bit of it. And while the state built their case, I still had contaminated material in front of my house. EPA ordered full remediation. A hazmat crew came in. Containment barriers, protective suits, heavy removal equipment. Neighbors stood on sidewalks watching like somebody was filming a disaster movie. Chunks loaded into sealed containers. Surface stripped all the way down. Testing, retesting, soil checks. Nancy leaned over one afternoon and said, "I've lived here 30 years and this may be the wildest thing I've ever seen." I laughed, because at that point, what else are you supposed to do? And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, Derek called me. Directly, no lawyer, no warning. His voice sounded different, not confident anymore. Tired, sharp, angry. He said, "You're blowing this way out of proportion." I actually laughed. Out of proportion? You got regulators crawling through everything because of one driveway. One driveway with asbestos. Silence, then he snapped. "You think you're helping people, you're destroying businesses." I stood on my porch looking at the hazmat crew loading debris. "You destroyed your own business, Derek. You have no idea what you've done." "No," I said. "I think I finally do." And then he hung up. The weird thing was, after I put my phone down, I didn't feel angry. Not really, I just felt clear. Like for weeks everything had been muddy and tense and confusing, and suddenly every piece was exactly where it belonged, because he'd spent years counting on fear. Counting on homeowners backing down, counting on embarrassment. And for the first time, somebody had pushed back hard enough to crack the whole thing open. What I didn't know yet was how much worse it was about to get. What I didn't know yet was how much worse it was about to get. About 3 weeks after Derek hung up on me, Clea called while I was in the garage reorganizing tools I hadn't touched in months. Her first words were, "You sitting down?" And at that point, I already knew sitting down was probably a smart move, so I dropped onto an overturned paint bucket and said, "Hit me," she exhaled. "The Attorney General is filing fraud charges." I stared at the concrete floor. Okay. And environmental violations, I nodded. Okay. And Eli, there are more driveways. That one got me. How many? At least 8 confirmed, maybe more. Apparently once local news ran the story, people started calling in from all over central Pennsylvania. Homeowners who thought they'd gotten a weird paving job or noticed strange dust or had surfaces breaking apart way too fast. Same gray material, same chunks, same contractor. Every report led back to Derek. The state moved quickly after that. Contractor license permanently revoked, business accounts frozen, supplier shut down, and the lien he filed against me dismissed, gone like it had never existed. Claire called with that update and actually laughed. Well, that didn't age well for him. That felt good, but the real moment, the one I still replay sometimes, happened a few mornings later. The EPA remediation crew had finally cleared everything, fresh base laid, real hot mix asphalt arriving. The legitimate company Claire recommended was out there working, and I stood near the mailbox with a cup of coffee while steam lifted off brand new black asphalt. Smooth, perfect, actually beautiful. Nancy walked over with her dog and looked down. Now that, she said, looks like a driveway. I smiled. Yeah. Then a black SUV pulled slowly onto the shoulder, state investigators, 2 of them, and Derek was in the back seat. I didn't expect that. He stepped out wearing jeans and a wrinkled jacket, no polished truck, no clipboard, no salesman's smile. He looked older, like 10 years older. One investigator approached me and explained they were documenting affected properties in person. Standard procedure. Derek had requested to be present with counsel. He barely looked at me at first, then finally glanced down at the new driveway, then back at the stripped-out area where hazmat crews had spent days digging, and for a second neither of us said anything. Then he muttered, almost under his breath, "This got out of hand." I looked at him. "No, you just finally ran out of people you could intimidate." That landed. His jaw tightened. He said, "You think you won?" I almost laughed. "No, Derek, I think everybody else stopped losing." One investigator actually looked down, trying not to smile. Derek didn't say another word. He got back in the SUV, and that was the last time I ever saw him in person. The lawsuit wrapped up a couple months later. Between remediation costs, replacement paving, legal fees, damages, and penalties, judgment landed at just over $39,000 tied directly to my case. Then additional state fines. Then environmental penalties, way higher. He tried bankruptcy. Didn't help. Environmental violations don't disappear because paperwork says they should. Assets got seized, wage garnishment kicked in, and he was legally barred from contracting again, ever. The supplier got hit too, major fines, permanent shutdown, and honestly they deserved every bit of it because this wasn't cutting corners, this wasn't oops wrong material. This was knowingly taking contaminated waste and putting it where families lived. Kids rode bikes, dogs tracked dust inside homes. That part still bothers me, even now. A few months later winter rolled in hard, snow covered everything. And one early morning I backed down my driveway with fresh coffee in the cup holder. No potholes, no cracks, no rattling suspension, just smooth pavement and cold air. I stopped at the road for a second and looked back. Simple thing, a driveway, but man, it felt bigger than that. Because for weeks I'd felt trapped. Like somebody had bulldozed into my property and expected me to quietly accept it. Pay up, keep moving, don't ask questions, and maybe 5 years ago I would have. Maybe I would have paid half. Maybe argued a little, maybe convinced myself it wasn't worth the headache. But this time, something about the arrogance of it, the threat, the assumption I'd roll over just hit different. And the crazy part is I still hear from people. Every now and then somebody finds the old news segment online or hears through a neighbor and reaches out. A few thanked me. One guy told me he canceled a contract after seeing Derek's name attached to an article. Another woman had already paid a deposit and got it back after asking harder questions. That feels good. Really good. But here's the thing that still gets debated around town, and I'm curious where you land on this. Some people think I pushed too hard. That once regulators got involved and jobs disappeared and businesses shut down, maybe I should have let the courts handle it quietly. Maybe not escalated. Maybe not dug deeper. Others say if I hadn't kept pulling at the thread, more people would have been walking over toxic debris for years. Honestly, I know where I stand. You don't get to gamble with people's homes, threaten them when they notice, then call yourself the victim when consequences finally show up. That's not bad luck. That's not business, that's a choice. And choices have a way of circling back, so I want to hear what you think. Did I take it too far, or was Derek finally getting exactly what he earned? Drop your take in the comments because I've seen people argue both sides hard on this one. And if you've ever had a contractor pull something shady on your property, tell that story too. And if you like real stories where people finally push back when somebody thinks they can get away with anything, stick around. There's always another one.